be agreed. The Honourable Carl McGinn.
Thank you, and well done, Ken, on what was a very long career, and you've definitely left your mark across the mining and pastoral electorate. I think the races will heavily miss you, particularly the regional racetracks. I know seeing you down at the Carnarvon races last year and up in Broome, I know you didn't mind heading down to the racetrack, and you're always sponsoring the little regional races as well, which I think was full credit to you. So I rise today to add my remarks to the address reply and go through what has been probably for everybody in this chamber and broadly a very busy, bizarre and, how do you say, hectic 4 to 5 months. I think leaving the chamber at the end of last year, heading out to the first election since being elected was an interesting feel, and I probably had thoughts that, you know, all the hard work in Parliament, maybe it's time for a little bit of relax, but that did not happen. We were out on the ground very early, very quickly, right across the mining and pastoral electorate in election mode, and talking about the great things that the McGowan government had done over the last 4 years and the great things, positive things, that the McGowan government would do if re-elected. And I have to say, at the end of it, it was really enjoyable, and the community was amazing to engage with, and we come away with a plan for the next 4 years that I think is going to progress regional WA, the mining pastoral electorate, even further, and create all them things that we've been looking for: livability, job security, and community values. That's something that really came back to me across the 4 years, the election, sorry, was that people were sick of the negative imaging, the negative conversation, the negative down-talking of regions that was just constant over the last 4 years from certain individuals. And it was just outrageous to see that that ploy was used, particularly in the Goldfields campaign, around running down our region, running down the success of what the Goldfields has achieved, running down projects that have gotten off the ground just because it was a Labor government that did them. And that really got up my goat, as you would say, and I think the results that reflected on that party, particularly in the Goldfields, should be a reflection on what a negative campaign can do to you. I think being positive and working closely with community groups and not stringing them along and running down your opposition in a negative, lying fashion will show into the future that hopefully a better campaign will come from that opposition out in the Goldfields. Well, I'm not holding my breath, but there were things that happened throughout that campaign that I'll raise throughout this speech that were really disappointing, and I think reflect very badly on the National Party particularly. So one of the main things when we got out and about was meeting with community groups and finding out what was the real need within small community groups out in the Goldfields. We had a fantastic candidate in the Goldfields with Ali Kent, who hit the ground running very early on in the piece, was already a very well respected and held very highly within the community for the work that she'd done at the Women's Healthcare Clinic, which has been one of my favourite organisations to work with out in the Goldfields since getting out there in 2017. The Women's Healthcare Clinic punches well above its weight and constantly runs off the smell of an oily rag, but provides absolutely amazing services to women that are in need, and they go above and beyond constantly. One of the key takeaways I took when I first met with Gloria Moore, besides the fact that she's a very bubbly and has a very great persona, was her passion to ensure that all women were given the opportunity for health in the Goldfields, particularly people that probably don't want to go to a hospital, somewhere where it's a bit safer to go. It's a nice big pink house that's tucked away, and they offer services there discreetly. And what actually happens most of the time by offering GP services and STI checks and all them type of things, they then find people are talking about domestic violence, and how do I get help for this, and who do I go and see, and financial assistance and food stamps, and that sort of stuff comes out of a conversation with health. And the Women's Healthcare Clinic, to me, is a valuable resource in the goldfields that now, under an election commitment from the McGowan government, will have a GP running all year round that'll provide women's health through the GP at that clinic. And that, to me, is an amazing outcome for that community group, because they will value that resource and they will ensure that it's utilised to the best of its ability, ensuring also that all women have access to it. And that, I think, is very commendable to that organisation. And Ali was the president of the Women's Healthcare Clinic and was also, besides working in government for many years in the departments, I believe education, she also worked very closely on consulting and writing grants for community groups, often doing it off of her own bat to ensure that there was an improvement within playgrounds and needs within the community, that grants were accessible and that people understood it, because we all know that applying for grants and trying to get funding that way can be quite onerous. And one of the things in the goldfields that keeps people, well, actually there is an advantage in the goldfields, and I think the gold industry, some do it right and some don't, but there's a few companies that have access to community funds where they'll offer grants up to $5,000 to $10,000, but they also have applications for them grants, which surprisingly can get just as bureaucratic as a government grant, and at times be very restrictive, and see organisations fall through the cracks. And Ali had a real knack of being able to walk organisations through that process to ensure that they were given the best opportunity to get access to that grant funding. And it was amazing to see when Ali was running as a candidate that organisations such as KCGM, BHP, Evolution, they'd already had engagements with Ali through trying to bring community groups into the fold and being successful in doing that as well. And I think that really set a platform for what Ali Kent stood for in the goldfields, a fair go and getting our fair share out there in the goldfields, not just from the state government, the local government and federal government, but for every opportunity that there was to get. Collaboration within the goldfields at the moment, I think, is at an all-time high. It's amazing to see organisations coming together to see what they can do to assist in projects that are around livability, projects that are important to the community, arts and culture. This is all going on whilst we're still in the grip of the pandemic. And we've still got learnings coming out of that. And one of the key things that Ali pointed out to me was, you realise last year, after that full year of in and out of COVID and all the complications that came with it, that school groups, camps, football clubs, hockey clubs, normally all year round are fundraising. All year round they're down at the local park doing a sausage sizzle, or they're down at the fair, they've got the tin rattling and they're having a go. From what I heard from, I think it was Boulder Primary School, they normally raise $14,000 for their school camp for Year 6s to come into Perth. And what that does is that offsets the cost of the camp for the kids. So instead of paying $1,000, kids would be paying $200. So there was a real hole left from COVID in respect to community groups and school groups. So some of the organisations got on board and definitely put in. There were community trusts started up, there was collaborations with CCI for small business grants, but the community groups that were left behind, we found ourselves going around and talking to them one-on-one and finding out what some of these key outcomes are. A good election commitment that we identified early on, working very closely with the Kalgoorlie-Boulder BMX, was the Kalgoorlie-Boulder BMX track, coming from someone as clearly doesn't ride BMX bikes. I thought it looked pretty grouse, to be fair, but once we got down there and had a look, and got talking with the boys and girls down there at the organisation, they had just recently had state titles where all BMX riders come in from a state out to Kalgoorlie, brings tourists with them. It's a really good event. But as they pointed out, their track was in not very good shape at all, and was requiring $70,000 to resurface the track. Ali, working very closely with them, managed to secure an election commitment for the BMX track, which will see a $70,000 resurfacing done. And what the organisation has said when we went out there to make the announcement, there's hundreds of people showed up just to see what was going to happen. They've been waiting for this track for a very long time. Was that they are in contention, obviously put aside the pandemic for now, they are in contention for a national title. So to bring all the BMX riders for a title race around Australia into the goldfields, which you know, from a $70,000 commitment of resurfacing a track to potentially bringing in for that organisation, for that club, such a great reputational event and an opportunity for them to build and grow. Very proud moment to be down there with the candidate Ali Kent, well now member for Kalgoorlie, Ali Kent, and see that one delivered hopefully very soon after being successful in the election. There's so many things that have happened across the mining and pastoral electorate that I could speak about, and it's very hard to pick them out, but there's true characters that I ran into across the campaign that, you know, I have to mention, and Henry and Kathy out in Laverton. Henry is the Labor man of Laverton, and he's also the salami man of Laverton. Very famous for making his own salamis and his own prosciutto, and self-confessed hermit who doesn't leave Laverton ever. And when he does, he spends an hour or 2 hours in Kalgoorlie, and that's enough for him. And Kathy, one of the best muffin makers in the business, I have to say. Mulberry muffins and mulberry jam was just phenomenal, kept us going across the election campaign. But the passion that came out of Henry and Kathy ran Ali's part of the campaign in Laverton and Leonora with another couple of people, and they were really passionate about their small town and about their view on what's needed and what should come. And talking with them and working with organisations, there was little projects that popped up that you can see the effects that they are going to have in a positive way. There was negative spin from the opposition around making these commitments, but I think if you take a hard look at it, $80,000 to Laverton dirt go-karting isn't just about people in Laverton getting around the go-kart track. Again, it's similar to the BMX, where they're looking at bringing people out for an event where they can hold on a weekend a go-kart racing tournament. But that goes in line, I think, with the thinking, particularly with the Shire in Laverton. I know the CEO, Peter Naylor, and us were having a chat, and one of his visions, which this hasn't come to fruition, by the way, but was to do a Ironman type event out there and use one of the old mine pits there that was full of water as the swimming leg. Now, my first view was, have you tested the water? To that he said, not yet, and she'll be right. But they were looking at, you know, something that will bring people from Perth and South Australia and across the East Coast, you know, triathlon runners and people that are in that space. The idea of running, riding and then swimming in an old pit, it's an attraction. And I think the Laverton Dirt Go-Kart is another one where I know particularly through the ag region, I think the Honourable Darren West go-karting is quite a big deal. And I think going out to Laverton, what it does for the town, it builds up the visitor centre, it builds up accommodation, and it's just an all-round good project in my view. We spent a lot of time talking with the men and women down at the Laverton's Men's Shed, another men's shed that is really open to men and women, which is a common theme I'm finding, particularly in regional WA, is a lot of the men's sheds are open to women as well, which I think is of great value. These sheds become socially galvanising for people that that maybe have lost loved ones later in life, that find themselves at home, not much to do, and don't really have a social life, often use a platform such as a men's shed to reintroduce themselves into their social life, which in turn has so many great effects, particularly around mental health. And I think being around people and in doing something potentially new can I think brighten somebody in a time of need. And the men's shed out there was struggling a little bit. They had many plans that they wanted to build on, and they've been trying to for many years. But Ali was able to secure an election commitment for $7,000, which builds a new kitchenette, $2,000 worth of tools, a marquee and tables for markets. These things they see as an opportunity to grow the men's shed and for it to be a better opportunity for people to come in. You know, $2,000 worth of tools, a kitchenette, which now gives the opportunity for it to be used for community groups as well. So when they go down to the markets, they'll potentially have not just the men's shed of woodwork, but the men's shed of muffin making, I'm assuming, in their kitchenette, which they'll go down and sell and raise their own funding on. Laverton Shire, I think Pat Hill is a great Shire president out in Laverton, and they do a lot of hard work, and they have a lot of ideas, and they've got a lot of innovation that they try to do to get themselves where they want to be in funding, particularly in roads. You know, Pat's been 35 years, I think, pushing the Outback Way, and I'm sure members of the mining and pastoral electorate would be well aware of Pat's vision of the world's biggest shortcut across to Queensland. I think some part of it will end up having Pat Hill Road on it, coming off of it, but Pat's very passionate about that road. But what we've seen change out there since 2017 has been amazing. You know, like when I first went out there with the Honourable Alana McGinn, and we were talking about funding and roads and where we're heading and engagement with mining companies. Like at the time, you know, honestly, the engagement with mining companies was very low. And there was a vision put to them, particularly from Alana McTiernan, about engagement and trying to work collaboratively. I'm not going to try and say that word again, but try and work together on outcomes that are great for Laverton, but also great for the mining companies that give an opportunity. So one of the key differences since 2017 would have to be the way they engage with roads, the way they engage with sealing roads and trying to get benefits for the town whilst getting infrastructure done, and working with mining companies to close down aerodromes and ensure that they use the airport in Laverton, which is now pumping, applying for extensions on the apron, getting a terminal at the airport. You know, all these like long-term visions that are now about utilising the resources of the mining company to invest in infrastructure locally. You know, there's always this conversation around mining camps, and there's, you know, you shouldn't build them within this far of communities, and you shouldn't do this, and they should be building houses. I think one model that I'm seeing that seems to be intriguing is a model that I believe Laverton's looking at now that Coolgardie did, which is where they allowed a camp to be built, but there was no services within that camp. The access to services such as food, drink, etc. was within Coolgardie. So you've seen like the IGA sales go up 20% in the first month that they were there. And what that did was actually allowed the IGA to expand internally and get more products and stay open longer and have more staff. The gym that the council has is now the gym that all the people in the camp use. There is no gym at the camp. So that now funds the gym and the gym equipment through membership for the Shire. Now that type of operation that's agreed through consultation and a lot of hard work with the mining companies, integrated into the town to an extent, I think has some value of conversation. And when you see services and shops and items that are needed for regional towns remain because of investment from mining companies, That's a positive win for regional Western Australia. You know, one of the quotes I think I've said in this place before is back in the 1970s and 80s, mining companies had their shoulder to the wheel on building towns because FIFO was pretty much non-existent. You know, and that's something that really changed and went into this different type of model, which has seen, I think, negative effects in regional WA. So just down the road from Laverton is Leonora. Leonora, again, has had many things going on, and working with the Shire there was some great opportunities to talk about projects that are beneficial, particularly to, as the Honourable Ken Baston touched on, antisocial behaviour and social issues within the mining and pastoral electorate, and the Honourable Robin Scott has touched on many times. There is no one-glove-fits-all thing here. This is every town trying the best they can to find ways to resolve it. And youth is definitely a key word that comes up when you're talking about antisocial behaviour, particularly out in Leonora. And working closely with the youth shed, we managed to secure new furniture, but talk about how we're going to look at it moving forward. And one of the things that we find is, and this is something right across the electorate, is come 6 p.m, what organisations are available for youth? You know, the PCYC do a fabulous job right across Western Australia, and they carry themselves very well. But one of the key problems is you end up finding the police after 6 o'clock are really the only organisation left on the beat. And that then becomes an interesting conversation on how youth are engaging, because all they're engaging with between 6 and 6 are police, rather than that youth service. Now, I know there are pockets where there are youth programs that run until midnight, and there's a basketball court thing that happens till midnight, and they run really well. But you find when them programs are running that a lot of the crime reduces. And it's just about trying to work with these organisations, in my view, to ensure their capacity internally grows, to ensure they can get benefits out of the grants to run these programs. And I have to say, working with them over the last couple of months has been really good. And it ties also in with arts and culture, because one other thing about my electorate that I love is the history of the architecture is, I think, not rivalled by anywhere else. You know, you go to Burt Street in Boulder, you go out to Leonora, the theatre out in Leonora is seen better days, but it's a beautiful architectural experience to see it on what it would have been like back in the day when it was pumping with theatre. And that's a project that, working closely with the Shire, was committed to by Ali Kent to see $100,000 go into that project and look at refurbishing what will be an amazing piece of history back up to the glory that it once was. So one of the key areas I said earlier that I have a big interest in is roads, and not just around getting roads sealed, but trying to find ways to ensure where the state government spends money, particularly roads, we spend a lot of money, federal government, state government, and it's an ongoing cost. Now, when I went out to Wiluna in 2017, we asked a question at a council meeting. I had Minister Rita Saffioti with me, and it was how many Aboriginal people that live locally are engaged in the mining companies here? And the answer was 1. And we had a community there of people, there was plenty of people there, and there was 1 engaged. Now, what we spoke about after much discussion, a project of theirs that they have been looking at for 35 to 40 years is the sealing of the Meekatharra-Wiluna Road. Now, there was obviously an issue where there was $60 million in the last days of a government chucked at that road, which was then taken away. But instead of sitting there and whinging about it, we thought, okay, you look at the economic benefits, the tourism benefits. It's some reason for 35 years it just hasn't gotten off the ground. It's 120 k's that needs to be sealed. So why not make this a project about Aboriginal employment? Why not make this about outcomes for Wiluna? Make this a project about training, development. Because as I said earlier, Pat Hills Road, the Outback Way heading up to Queensland, is going to see well over $500 million worth of investment in the years to come. Now, that road work is on Aboriginal land. There's many groups throughout that space that could be engaging and being trained up to create, not just for the jobs, but create their own business, have their own road building business. Because the other add-ons you get out of that is all the local government roads, all the flood damage roads funding that comes in. Every year the maintenance road funding that comes in from state government. Where can we engage with these Aboriginal contractors and get them to a point where they are fighting and tendering for these works right across their country? And that's something that we focused on heavily back in 2017 and 2018 around the project to do a part of the seal 5 to 10 kilometres of the Meekawaluna Road. But the mindset around it was about outcomes. The mindset around it was about jobs and about future jobs. And I have to say, you know, it takes a special type of person to be able to get into that space and operate at a high level and see the outcomes that we've seen out of that project. And Mac Jensen down at the training school there should be commended for his efforts. A man that's worked in regional WA for most of his life, but engages so well with traditional owners and gets in there and actually understands some of the nitty-gritty issues, such as trying to get together a group and instead of everyone staying in town for the training, we'll move 10 kilometres out to this area and this is where we're going to do our training. And we do it as a unit and we create a team and we support each other. And you know, he first started this not based at roads, but when he went out to that TAFE building and the first time he got there, it was full of woodworking equipment. Now, what woodworking jobs is there in Maluna? Might be a handful, if you're lucky. Probably more contractors coming from Perth anyway. But he went, okay, well, what's something else we can do? So got in contact with the TAFE and worked out a way to say, right, let's clear out the woodwork stuff and let's bring in car repairing. Because a lot of people travel between everywhere, a lot of migration out in regional WA and remote WA, and what's the one thing that people are interested in? Getting in a car rather than walking. So what you've seen happen was the community buy into this program, buy into the support and buy into the TAFE. And there were people coming through that hadn't ever done a course before and now learning how to repair cars. And there were so many cars at the community that were able to be worked on. It became quite a great project. And from that, we then got together and started talking about road building. How do we get road building on the agenda? And Main Roads had to have a bit of an attitude change, had to think, okay, this road is focused on outcomes for the Māori people. And that, to me, having that mindset going in has seen that project become so successful. And now that they completed that project, also done within a time span that was culturally appropriate, so certain parts of the year for law business, few bits of sorry business had to happen, lots of fluid stuff happening throughout that project. Get to the end of it, it ended up being a huge segment on national ABC around these outcomes for 15 Māori people, men and women. The elders were there when we opened up this section and were just so happy with the minister for investing in them. But the first thing they said is, where's the next bucket? Let's get going again. And the minister then put this road down as a priority for the state, which seen $20 million that came from infrastructure from the federal government now put to the Meekawaluna Road. Now, that's not $20 million that'll be spent in the first 12 months and then sealed up to here. That's $20 million that'll be working with them groups around what time of the year they can work, how we can get the training model so that we got training people coming into it to train on that road, and then that business goes across to the Outback Way. And then you've also got Carey Mining that are dabbling in that space as well. And Carey Mining have such a huge reputation. Daniel Tucker, starting out in Laverton and working his way up, is focused on them type of projects as well, which, as I said earlier, it's not just about state government roads, it's about all the road infrastructure. It's about, if the local government's asking why is there no employment, well, we want to see road building done by locals on them roads if they're trained to do that. and then the mining companies engaging these Aboriginal road contractors in their area right across the goldfields and beyond. I think there is a real opportunity moving forward for roads to become the next Ranger program. I think the Ranger program is such a great outcome for Aboriginal people in regional Western Australia because it's jobs on land, and it's something they see, the young people see as a role model. And I think road building has that opportunity, and why shouldn't it? Because when we're sealing these roads, we're changing what's happening and the amount of tourists and the amount of people that are coming into these areas. So their life's changing by us sealing these roads as well. So why not make it collaborative? And why not see a focus on ensuring that people like the Madu get the opportunity to not just get a job for a couple of months, but build a business that then goes out there and tenders, and that's creating what I think our state dollar should be spent on, local projects, local jobs in that respect. Very, very proud to see where that project has gone and to see that there's $20 million that will see a good 3 to 4 years worth of road building on that road. There's also some more maintenance sealing happening at the Meekatharra end. I was speaking to the Shire the other day. It's exciting to think that we're starting to bail our way down that road, and I know people will say it's not quick enough, you need to do it now. Well, I'm focused on ensuring that we get the outcomes on that project, and that's something that I think will benefit the town, the people, the Shire and everyone, which again is, I think, important when you're spending money. I spent a lot of time on the road, like I'm sure most member-elects and members did during the election. I'm not sure how many Ks I put up, but one trip was over a week and 4,500 kilometres. It was a nice drive. Got to see what is a beautiful electorate through North West Central and meet with some amazing organisations. Got to see a little bit of bad politics being played, scare campaigns, fake advertising against the Labor Party, you know, things being authorised by CEOs in small little shires that were saying, you know, stuff that wasn't done in the last government, wasn't done in this government, so Labor's the problem, which was disappointing. And once you sat down with them shire presidents and had a conversation, they started to realise that there were influences happening from certain members of parliament in the North West Central electorate that, you know, it's easy to go out there and promise over $200 million worth of election commitments when you know you can't deliver it. But it's harder to tell the real truth about what projects are going to be funded. It's harder to tell the truth and be positive about where we're heading rather than be negative and drive down the regions and constantly tell mistruths. My God, amount of things that I had to deal with because the member had been there and said things that were just false. All in the hope to cling on to a seat, you know, like if you're getting to that point, I think you've got to ask yourself a question, what have you done for 8 years? And it was disappointing, but Cherie Sipasato was running in North West Central for the Labor Party, and Cherie was an amazing candidate as well. A very proud Aboriginal woman who took on a seat that's geographically the biggest in Western Australia, if not the world, and took it on head down, went out there, met with organisations, told the hard truths, made some great election commitments, had some great forums, managed to bring Thomas Mayer up there to talk about Ullaru's statement from the heart, which has came to Parliament in the last in this term, which is an amazing opportunity for people to engage in that conversation. Cherie worked so hard. And, you know, first past the post, she won, but it was the preferences that got her in the end. But she worked really hard for the people in North West Central and has seen some amazing projects be committed to due to her advocacy. One of the major ones that I'm really looking forward to working with is a new basketball court in Mungala community. I've got a funny story actually. I've got a couple from the election, but Cherie's partner, Ginger, is a big man, he's broad shoulders, and we went door knocking in Mungala, and there was a lot of dogs around. I said to him, I said, oh, look, you know, you're my security guard, you know, you got to make sure the dogs don't get me. And anyway, so I've walked up this driveway and he was behind me. About 5 metres from the door, this pit bull come running straight out the door, straight at me. And anyway, I've turned around to run and he's already over the fence and gone about 20 metres. And I'm standing there going, oh yeah, cheers, Ginger. You know, it's, you've grown up here and you ran straight away from the first pit bull that come running out the door. Yeah, well, come on. Let's be honest, he didn't have to run the 20 metres over the fence. I hadn't even got 5 metres away from where I was like stuck. But luckily the pit bull veered off to the right and kept going, so that was good, and we got to door knock Mungala, and one of the key issues there was, you know, there was a basketball court that hadn't been touched for probably 10 years. It was all cracked up and fences were ripped down, and you know, it was in a bad state. And Cherie managed to get an election commitment of $150,000 to see that basketball court rebuilt. And when we went out there to talk about it, the kids were ecstatic. You know, like they play, and there's little things that I think are going to be implemented into this project that make a lot of sense. Solar power that goes into the lights, and then the lights will stay on to 10, 11 o'clock. Fencing, potentially some. I don't know if other members have seen it, but there's a new trend with basketball that sort of involves trampolines, and it's a little bit more exciting than the normal basketball. I'm going to take a punt and say bounce ball or something, but it's interesting, and it draws, again, like I was saying before, it draws people in. It brings people to these small towns for something different. So I'm looking forward to that project getting underway, and again, that's going to be focused on Aboriginal contractors and Aboriginal employment in that area, which I think is exciting. One of the things that I touched on at the start, which I might go to now, and again, as I said, positive feeling, positive campaigning, positive on the ground from people saying the leadership from the McGowan government has given them confidence, and they want to give the McGowan government another term, another opportunity because of what's been achieved in 4 years. I think in 2017, when I was up in Karratha, the feeling of politics was, you know, well, it was almost like a protest vote, and that's why I think you've seen such a high vote, particularly for One Nation, was there was that view of, well, it's just Labor and Liberal, da-da-da-da-da. But there was a real change this time. It really felt to me like strong leadership was something that they wanted to see from their leaders, and they wanted to have faith in a party that they can deliver what they're saying they will, which we did. We delivered on our plans for the mining and pastoral electorate. We delivered on what we said we would do, and that's something that I think people respected. One thing, this was one of the most bizarre campaign techniques I think I've ever seen. We've seen this Facebook page go up, and I'm sure the National Party know exactly what I'm talking about. Out of nowhere, this Facebook page went up, say no to Labor's gold tax. Say no to Labor's gold tax. They're going to reintroduce the gold tax. Now, it was interesting because it was just, it was authorised by A. Clark. Couldn't understand who A. Clark was, and it looked like they'd spent a bit of money on it, you know, with some nice pictures, and then as soon as you pull up the thing, it says, like other pages that relate, candidate Rowena Olsen for the National Party. Candidate Big Nick Fardell for the National Party. Nick actually made a comment on it very early about, I support this, rah, rah, and then took it off once he realised that, you know, it probably wasn't the right thing to do. I'm getting to that one, honourable member. You've just ruined like my big kicker. Cheers. So basically this page has gone up and no one could understand what was going on. Then the Liberal Party comes out, MLA Corin O'Donnell goes, there's a gold tax coming, you know, because of this page. And then Zach Kirkup comes running out to the goldfields, and it was just like I couldn't understand what was going on because I'd been sitting next to the Honourable Ben Wyatt when he ruled that out. And it was a real scare campaign, and I started thinking, I'm thinking, oh, it says it's come from all these mining companies. And I'm talking to mining companies, etc. And anyway, I was standing on the pre-poll one day and I see the Nationals candidate go running off, and I was like, oh yeah, a bit bizarre to leave the pre-poll because everyone's been here every day. Got a call from a journalist and said, oh, what do you think of this A. Clark? I said, been trying to work that out for a couple of months. Oh, that's Rowena Olsen's dad. The candidate for the National Party's dad had made the Facebook page and was running this campaign of scare and fear and negativity in the regions, which I've become quite used to with the National Party in the goldfields. You know, I have stood in this place before and spoke about some very unsatisfactory behaviour that was thrown at me and other people in the government, which reared its head again on election day, but I won't go there this time. It was really disappointing to see, you know, a fake campaign put up. But what was more interesting was the authorisation on the Facebook page changed to the campaign manager of Rowena Olsen. So they took off A. Clark, who's Rowena's dad, and put on the campaign manager. And I'm going, okay, so the journalists have asked the question, you know, you're running this campaign. Oh no, I know nothing about it. So you don't know that your dad's running a scare campaign on the gold tax and then your campaign manager takes over. Oh no, I know nothing about it, I can't control that. But dad's there handing out on election day and the campaign manager's handing out on election day. It was just a pure negative, grab hold of something, throw mud till it sticks type of campaign that cost the National Party, I believe, in that electorate. I think it was close to 14%. Now, Big Nick, when he ran in the Senate, he halved the vote for the National Party in the Senate, and he's pretty much halved the vote in the upper house, I believe, because they didn't end up getting a mining and pastoral seat. Surely he finally understands that you can't put fear, loathing and scaremongering into a campaign every single time and expect to get elected. You need to be positive and you need to be working with community groups. It is just so embarrassing to see lies and fear be spread everywhere I went. Where the Nationals had gone, I was debunking things, particularly from the upper house candidate. You know, I know the Honourable Jackie Boydell, who's moving on, didn't operate like that. You know, it was very disappointing to see that the person that was chosen by the party to replace the Honourable Jackie Boydell was out there running them type of campaigns. Now, I'll get to what the Honourable Sue Ellery was picking at before, was no, he's not Honourable, the candidate-elect Nick Fardell was on radio yesterday. He was on radio yesterday talking about... He didn't win a seat. Sorry. The pre-selected candidate who didn't get elected in the mining and pastoral electorate, Nick Fardell, was on radio, thank you for that, was on radio ABC. And this was astonishing. First was throwing shots over the bow, you know, directed at me, because that seems to be his favourite thing to do. And then he was put into a question, what's your view on upper house reform? And he goes, well, my view's simple, you know, abolish the upper house. So this is someone who was running for the National Party, for the upper house, number one on the ticket, who replaced Jackie Boydell on the ticket, the Honourable Jackie Boydell, has come out and said, oh no, I really think we should just abolish the upper house because that'll save $50 million to the taxpayer. Now, what I've heard from opposition members in this chamber, particularly from the National Party, is the value of the House of Review. Now, this candidate, who was unsuccessful, obviously had these views prior to losing, unless it's spilt milk, unless it is, no matter how many times I try, I just can't get elected, so let's abolish it. You know, unless that's the attitude. That view must have been something he held prior to yesterday's radio interview. So was he running, why was he running in a system that he didn't believe in? I just found it absolutely astonishing that he'd come out with that. Another thing we've seen from that campaign was, you know, we were talking about royalties for region and projects and money. And the candidate for the National Party came out with an $88 million stamp duty saving, which was quite interesting. The sale of the super pit, there was going to be stamp duty returned to the state, and what the National Party decided was a good idea was to hypothecate some more. I'm sure the Honourable Steve Thomas would have a few things to say about that, and basically said that we're going to put 88 million of that stamp duty back to the state. 88 million of that's going to go into a fund, a future fund for Kalgoorlie that's going to earn interest, etc. And the other 88 million, I, the candidate Rowena Olsen, am going to create a list of what it should be spent on. And add it to the list, I think the campaign was called, basically spending $88 million of this stamp duty. And it was just bizarre that when asked questions such as how are you going to improve R4R so that we don't see financial mismanagement, checks and balances, checks and balances, checks and balances. But we're going to go hypothecate another 88 million here, another 88 million there, we're going to go do this, because we're going to give everyone the opportunity to ask for everything they want. It was a really bizarre piece of campaigning that I think the results probably reflect where that campaign was at. I did manage to get out to a fair bit of remote polling. Something that I think, and I'll be raising this with the Minister, it was quite interesting. The timing of this election does not go very well in remote communities. And I'm sure the Honourable Robin Scott would agree with me that law business was on in many of the areas. And I think we've probably seen, I haven't had a close look, but I know from the figures I've seen originally, they were very down on remote polling. I believe there was only close to about 100 that voted out in Warburton, down from about 500 in the election before. 60. So, well, there you go. You know, went out to Mount Margaret and we got a handful where there was normally 50 to 60. And, you know, like, again, I had another blooper, which I'm not afraid to say in here. I was heading to Cosmo Newbury to go to the to the free poll, and I had this meeting and I was like, yep, I'll chuck it in the Google. And, you know, like, you're out in these remote areas, and so I've taken the road and I'm like, yep, 200 k's down Cosmo Newbury. Took the phone off, driving, I'm like, geez, I've gone 200 k's. I'm like, where's Cosmo Newbury? And then I seen a sign that said Cooper Petey's that way. And I was like, turns out I turned one short and I ended up heading towards Cooper Petey. But I found out from the remote pollers that 10 people showed up there, and that was disappointing because they were expecting close to 50 to 100 there as well. So, but, you know, not afraid to let you know I do make mistakes. Once I got out, I did actually have a moment where I got out the car and did the whole no, you know, but tried to find a bush track that took me across, but didn't quite do it. But look, going out to them communities gave me an understanding that we need to do better in that space on giving people the opportunity to vote. And, you know, this 3-week pre-polling conversation tied in with remote polling, I think there's a lot of opportunity to grow and to change. I rang the AEC up before the cut-off of renewals, and I said, look, can you give us 1,000 renewal forms, because I'm going to go out to the remotes and that, and a lot of people aren't enrolled. And they said, oh, it's all online now. And I said, I just told you I'm going out to the remotes. There's no internet in half the places I'm going to. Oh, well, no, we can't print them for you. So, like, you know, surely we should be giving every opportunity we possibly can. If someone's going to go out there, the AEC should be going, yeah, okay, look, here's some resources, off you go. Because at the end of the day, it's not about who they vote for, it's about democracy and the opportunity to vote. And I really feel that there was missed opportunity. I did hear on the remote polling out in Warburton that one day they couldn't land on the airstrip because the airstrip wasn't kept in properly. Another day there was sorry business, so there was nobody there. You know, that means come back next week, you know, and I know that's hard to do and planning and everything else, but we've got to get better at it, because what happened was a missed opportunity for people to actually engage in the democratic process, which was disappointing. Regional airfares. Look, obviously something heavily on the agenda for many years. We've seen an inquiry into regional airfares in this term of government, last term, 2017. And what we now see as a commitment from the McGowan government is a capped airfares program that's going to work in 2 zones. This was very well received and by no means I think is going to be the silver bullet to regional airfares, but I think it's a start. And people seen it as a great opportunity, you know, to be able to cap it at $1.99 and $2.99 rather than sometimes paying $600, $700 one way. They'll know what the price is during that program. And I reckon working with our airlines, we should be able to see a lot more come on in that space. And again, it always interests me when we talk about airfares and FIFO, because I don't feel as though that some of the leaderships, particularly in local governments, understand, like that inquiry showed us, how that some of the FIFO actually offset some of that cost, and it could be even more expensive and even less flights. So when we're out there saying no more FIFO from Perth to the regions, we really need to understand how that's going to affect costing on airfares as well, and other flow-on effects, which I think hopefully we'll be able to investigate a bit further. There was another great commitment made by the McGowan government and Ali Kent out in the Goldfields, $2.1 million for a youth hub. Something that the Goldfields has been looking for a while now is a central area where the youth of Kalgoorlie can gather, where organisations can set up, where they can put their resources to work. And the Lord Forest Memorial Pool, which doesn't have a pool, is a great location at Kingsbury Park. Working with the City of Kalgoorlie-Boulder, we're going to see created a hub for the youth of the Goldfields, which I think will see all organisations from health, education, all come together and assist the city on running programs and events through that hub that will bring all our youth together and galvanise them. You know, I've spoken here a few times about my intern I've had on from 2017, Amy Astle. She's done it again. She went out and held a youth forum late last year, and it was phenomenal to see the youth that came in and were speaking about their issues and getting it in front of the minister. And the Minister, Dave Kelly, listened, you know, and it was amazing to see when you give a young person an opportunity, the outcome is endless. You know, you don't know where they can go with that, and I think more of that type of engagement with youth we'll see, particularly with their own hub and their own place. I think we'll see the youth of the Goldfields flourish a bit more. I'm excited about Carey Mining with their Aboriginal mining employment program that they're going to be running through WASM. Really good. Daniel Tucker's got a great vision on having training and education for Aboriginal mine workers, so that there's a program in place. So instead of companies saying, oh, it's too hard and we can't engage with Aboriginal people and, you know, it's just a tick and flick operation, there is somewhere to go. And then to add on to that, this is how exciting it is in the Goldfields at the moment and everywhere else, is Rowena, an Aboriginal lady out in the Goldfields, has created and is in the process of establishing the Aboriginal Chamber of Commerce in the Goldfields. And having that tied in with a training opportunity, tied in with Aboriginal small businesses, is such an amazing opportunity in the Goldfields right now. You've got full economic growth, you've got projects steaming ahead, you've got this constant history of, oh, it's too hard, we don't know where to find them, and, you know, what businesses are Aboriginal businesses. Now you're going to have collaboration and you're going to have a base on where to go. Working closely with Daniel Tucker on getting that to fruition. And again, I'll say it again, it ties into that road project idea just beautifully. So Linus, for example, is about to have a huge construction out there of about $500 million worth of investment on a leaching cracking plant. And some of the things they're going to be doing out there are great opportunities to get Aboriginal businesses engaged in early for long-term projects. So Carey Mining started... Sorry, mate? I can't hear you, got a mask on. So we had the projects out there with Linus coming on, working closely with getting them engaged and putting them through. Now, Carey Mining, when they first started, got one contract. And from that contract, they've worked their way up. They had a start-up, and now they're almost to the point where they're going to have their own mining venture. That's really exciting to see. And you don't just see them sitting back and focusing on their business, because Alan and Daniel are focused on trying to get Aboriginal people engaged throughout all mining industry, which I think is a real benefit to the Goldfields region, which in turn will, I think, see better outcomes throughout the Goldfields. And I think Daniel Tucker and his team should be commended for that, and I look forward to working with them across this term of government to see that program grow even bigger. Lastly, I just want to make mention to all the volunteers and all the people that assisted throughout the campaigns, particularly in North West Central and the Goldfields. It was a tough campaign. Geographically, lots of travel, but everyone was there because they wanted to see a better outcome for the Goldfields and believe that a McGowan government can deliver that. And we've now got plans in place that we're going to see delivered over the next 4 years. And I believe Ali Kent, member for Kalgoorlie, is going to do an amazing job in delivering her plans for the Goldfields and working with the community on building a bigger and better Goldfields. North West Central will be an interesting 4 years. We're very lucky enough to see 4 members for Mining and Pastoral elected from WA Labor, and the soon-to-be Honourable Peter Foster out in Tom Price. The results that came in Tom Price were pretty amazing. The votes were really good, and we did see a project announced out there for the Tom Price Hospital, which was very well received by the community, and also $13 million towards the Meekatharra.
I'm just going to do you the courtesy of letting you know you've got 3 minutes left on your
Thank
time,
you very much,
in
Madam
lieu of
President.
us not having a clock.
Thank you very much. And also $13 million towards the Meekatharra Hospital, which we all know is getting on, and it's quite dilapidated. I'm not going to try these words anymore. It's run down, dilapidated, and there are planning that needs to happen now, but having $13 million there to work through it is a great opportunity. But whilst out there... Sorry?
The whole hospital system going down too.
Okay, all right, yeah. Let's just get negative again. Let's not talk about some of the good projects that are out there and some of the good things that are happening, which is what I'm trying to achieve here, is talk about some of the good stuff. But anyway, we have some great programs that organisations that we worked with in the North West Central electorate. Particularly a good one that I got working with was Yoella. Just a constant drone. It's just Yoella was a great organisation in Meekatharra that had some good projects that they're looking forward to doing. And Yoella Community Garden Project, working through the CDP and engaging locally, I think is going to be a great project to watch over the next year or so as it rolls out. Not to mention, they work very closely through the CDP, which I think has had some great outcomes in Meekatharra, and I'm looking forward to working with them into the future. But I will finish on saying that it was an interesting election. I think the result reflects probably the campaigns more than anything out there, and the people engaging on a level that I've never seen in politics. And I know I'm only young and I've only been in a couple of elections, but the engagement on actual interest in politics was very, very surprising. So thank you, Madam President.